Oh my goodness. Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Lisa, also known as EnergieGal. I'm an intuitive guide, an energy healer, a spiritual mentor, and a wellness coach promoting empowered living. And I am your host here on the EnergieGal podcast, where we experience transformational conversations. In this safe, gentle space, storyteller and listener gather to share, be vulnerable and authentic. We laugh, sometimes we cry, we feel, heal, and we transform. It is our intention that by baring our hearts and sharing our stories and coming out from behind the masks, that you would be encouraged to do the same, to remember that you too have a story and you too are worthy of healing through it and to a space of peace, love, and bliss. Your truest identity. So today is March 6th, 2022, and we are on episode 4, and we are so jazzed to have you here with us. Now, I want to introduce to you, hey, it's a good sign, it's 111.
Oh,
111.
Nice. I'll take it.
I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who, though we've only met in the past few months or so, feels like someone who resonates so deeply with me. So let me tell you a little bit about her. She writes, after 22 years in public education, she has decided to use her master's degree and teaching experience to become an author, speaker, and empowerment mentor. She has just self-published her first memoir under her pen name, Margo Reilly. Now, the book is entitled When the Apple Falls Far from the Tree and outlines a lifetime of challenging situations and the tools she used to make it to the other side of adversity. From growing up chaotic in a house of violence to cancer recovery, multiple weight loss surgeries, and a newly sober lifestyle, she feels compelled to share her resources with others who seek personal growth and improvement. She is the creator of the blog site justbeingjill.com, where followers can find motivation and inspiration for everyday, real life connection. My friends and listeners, it is my honor and great excitement and super duper anticipation to introduce you to Margo Reilly, also known as Jill, and I forgot to ask how to pronounce your name, but I'm going to try it. Krzyzanowicz.
You nailed it.
Ah! It's going to be a good day. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and hello, listeners.
Welcome. I'm so thankful to have you here. You know, you're my first podcast where I'm reviewing a book.
Very, very cool. And you're the first time I'm sitting around to talk about my book.
I'm very excited about this.
I'm honored as well.
Yeah. I want to show our listeners, for those of you who are on the YouTube visual, this is Jill's book that just came out on the 20th of February?
22nd, 2/22.
Very nice. So very exciting, and I think the graphics are great. You did a nice job.
Thank you. It was very fun.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing this, and I'm excited and read it. And it was, I have to tell you, when I say that it was an easy read, I mean it was not complicated. It got right to the situation.
I feel like that's the number one feedback that I'm getting, is that it's just conversational.
Yeah.
It feels like you're sitting down and talking, and that's exactly what I intended.
I feel like, which is why I didn't want to do Zoom. I felt like when I was listening, or when I was reading the book, that I was listening to you, and I had my cup of tea there, and you had your Crystal Light or whatever, and you were unpacking your story. And the chapters were just enough for me to then take a deep breath, and it was, and yet I have to tell you that I made sure that I had a couple of days where I knew that I was in safe space, because having had a troubled childhood myself, I wanted to be aware of any triggering that could have happened for me.
Sure.
And so I just want to say, as an aside to our listeners and viewers, if perchance you find yourself, as you're listening to what it is that we are unpacking today, feeling resistant or feeling quite emotional, or you're feeling something in your physical body, I want you to know that this is not abnormal. When you start to hear things that resonate with stuff that's still in your body, you can't, because energies and trauma exist in the physiology, you can start to feel it in your body. And what I would encourage you to do would be to breathe, to take a deep breath in, to take a look around the room, and to remember something that you love so much, whether it's a person, a place, a thing, a memory. Just remember that love and come back down into your body, and just trust that you're moving energy and that what you're experiencing is, to a degree, it's healing, even though it's kind of scary. So just wanted to put that out there. I want to start with some questions, unless you had something to say to start with.
No, not at all. I just love that you got that same thing. This is the first time that she and I are actually discussing the book since she read it. So you're getting a very natural and authentic conversation about it. And I'm loving that people are feeling that way. And it's funny you said, like, it's easy not in that it's easy material, but easy that it's like a conversation. So I'm just glad to hear you had that.
I'm glad that it was an easy read in that way, conversational, because the topic itself was very challenging.
Yes, a lot of people have come to me and said, wow, just wow.
Yeah.
And I always knew that I was going to write this book. My whole life I told myself I was going to write this book. And when I sat back and read it myself, I kind of did the wow as well. But I also got to reap the rewards of the healing and benefits that came from releasing and letting go of that wow.
Yeah. I like that you say that in writing it there was release, but then even in reading it that there's release.
Yes, for sure. I think each time I read it, it almost affirms, deepens the understanding of the healing or the forgiveness or whatever it was I moved through. I think it just kind of helps take it to another level.
So insightful. I think that's why I think journaling is so, I'm sure we'll get to journaling and aspects of that, but why journaling is so important. And then going back and actually reading it.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
I wanted to actually start at the title and say, unpack the title and this little subtitle, Discovering the Gifts Within the Chaos.
Okay. Well, the title was very fun to come up with. I actually came up with the title. That wasn't something that's been with me the whole time. I definitely came up with that as I was writing. And it was because I have heard that term, so many times. Oh, that apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And anytime somebody would say that near me or to me in my life, I would think, oh, my apple did. Thank goodness my apple did. It can happen. And sometimes I would joke and say that out loud. So one day somebody said that and I was like, wow, that's the title. That's exactly what happened here. My apple fell far away from the tree. Mm-hmm. And the subtitle, Discovering the Gifts Within the Chaos, came also as a result of writing. When I had written the whole manuscript originally, it was just my story. And then I tell of a time that I was actually driving in my car and like a lightning bolt, I listened to a song that basically was, I'm thankful for the gift. It was a Christmas song. And just at that exact moment, it was like a divine download that told me, you have to tell what the gift was in that particular episode of your life. Because you could kind of pull it out, but I wanted to also verbalize it. Mm-hmm. And I realized at that point that that's what could make my memoir also helpful to a reader in saying, here's what happened to me, but here's what I took away from it, and here's what you could also take away from a similar experience or situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you did it very well.
Thank you.
It was nice to be able to end most of the chapters on what I would have considered a healing note and an invitation for others to find the gift within their chaos as well.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to come out from behind Margo Reilly?
That's an interesting thing. So in choosing a pen name, initially it was difficult. I felt like it was my story and I wanted to claim it, and it should be, I should be able to write underneath my name. But obviously, due to the content of the book and respecting the people who are part of my story, a pen name was just imminent. So I got through that resistance when I was in the final editing process with my publishing company, and I read the book. I had been editing and working on pieces of the book, but at the end I had to read the book. I had to do full read-throughs, like three different times. And it wasn't until then that I did those full read-throughs that I understood that it was an alter ego. I was not different than Jill or Margo. I was just going to a different part of myself to get through these adversities. And so when I was able to see those episodes of my life and the hero that got through those episodes as just another aspect of me, it became easy to choose the name Margo Reilly, because I was just giving a name to that part of me. And I was very particular. I didn't want to just pick any name. I actually researched, and Margo means grit and Reilly means courage. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of meaning behind those two names. Mm-hmm. And I think they really, anybody who reads the story or that knows me in real life knows that those are two of my qualities. And so I felt like I was just claiming the hell out of them by choosing that name. So
very cool. Very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I love this part. You begin by saying, never stop believing you are meant for more. And you end it by saying, never stop believing that you are meant for more. And you even dedicate to myself, never stop believing you are meant for more. I circled it because I was like, she dedicated this to herself. It was just such a good note to start off.
Yeah, you're going to get me choked up on that.
And then you end it by saying the same
to the
thing
reader. Yes.
To the reader. Keep believing in yourself. You too are meant for so much more. And I'm like, well, it's like, a beautiful Oreo cookie. And they're beautiful.
Well, let's pull that Oreo apart. Well, I think, like, if you hear that, you're meant for more. I'm not talking about a necessarily material or tangible type thing. When I say meant for more, I'm referring to the allowing, to not be idle, to not settle, to know that there is always more to come when you're open to receiving and allowing, because there are things out there seeking us. And I think at a very young age, I knew that. And that is what made me understand I didn't have to choose that life. And so there's just more to come. We're not meant to be idle. We're not meant to be settled for what we currently have and think, oh, this is as good as it gets. There's always something more if you're allowing and you're receiving it to come in.
How do you allow?
Well, it's something I'm still working on right now, but it's really just that trust in faith, as cliche as it sounds, that belief that everything happens for a reason. We say that and people say, oh, that's cliche. But if you truly do believe that everything happens to a reason, then that means you have faith. You have faith in a higher power, and that every person, every experience, every situation, every bump in the road, every wonderful gift, everything put in our pathway is supposed to happen for us for a reason, whether it's a gift or it's growth or it's, a lesson. If you truly believe that, then you are allowing. You're allowing.
Just sit here with that one for a moment. If when you were 3 or 7 or 11, if someone had said to you, this is all happening for a reason, would that have helped?
Yes and no. Yes, in that, obviously when you're going through the struggle, it's much more difficult to see the other side of it. But I also think that innately I knew that. I didn't know that I knew it at the time, right. But I just always had this inkling of faith or inner knowing that that wasn't going to happen to me, and that someday I was going to live a fulfilling life away from and aside from what I was experiencing.
There was a part of you that was still tapped into that true identity, as love, as abundance, as bliss. And a part of you, it sounds like, that said, yeah, this is happening, and it's even happening to me, but somehow it's also happening for me, and I'm going to find the way. It's like, I joke around that I'm always looking for the pony. There's this story that goes where these scientists put two kids into two different rooms filled with horse manure. And the one kid is sitting on top of the horse manure, and he's all upset, and he's just pissed off, and life is just crappy. And they look in the window of the other, and the kid is just whistling Dixie, and he's clawing through. And so they opened the door, and they said, well, what are you doing? And he was just like, wow, with all this shit in here, there has got to be a pony somewhere. And I think that, for whatever reason, this kid knew that manure is fertilizer.
And sign, there's a horse somewhere nearby.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I think that our truest self, underneath all the masks and underneath all the hurt and all the trauma, remembers that.
Yeah. Yes. And there are definitely times in my life where that tap was, tuned in and on, and times in my life when it was definitely not.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to be back at a place where it is. Yeah.
Do you think that it changes your perspective of how you experience life now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We get so, especially like when I was going through the chapter of like cancer, and, when you're in that, it's very difficult to think that something good is supposed to come from something like that. It's
something good could come up.
Correct. And initially I wanted to believe I was being punished for something. I mean, that was my initial thought, was that I'm being punished for something. And then I had to realize that really it was just a way for me to take some downtime, some healing time. And even though I mention in the book that my true awakening occurs when my sobriety chapter begins, I think it was the onset of my cancer chapter that really started setting the wheels in motion. And of course, I'm grateful and thankful for that.
Right. I mean, for some of us, I know with me, it's a jarring event that you just cannot stay in the same vibration.
Correct.
You have to wake up.
Yes.
There's no not waking up.
I will praise myself in that I definitely got myself out of that slump real quick. I was there for a hot minute for sure, but I did a really good job getting out of it quick and just like, nope, I'm going to beat this. I have no doubt in my mind that this is, I'm going to beat this, and so let's just do what we've got to do to get to the other side. And it just went like that from that point forward.
I was talking with someone the other day who's struggling in some health issues, and this particular person always wanted to speak positively all the time because they were so afraid that if they didn't speak positively that they would be, causing more disease. And I said, where does being honest with your feelings and feeling them come in then? What would be your opinion on that?
I'm not really sure, but I do know we have to allow it to go both ways. There's this
a balance in it?
Yes, I mean, there's a coined phrase out there now. I think it's toxic positivity.
Oh.
And I think people, I mean, I've had people say to me, oh my God, how can you be so happy all of the time? Like almost as if it isn't real. And that doesn't mean that I don't have down times. It means I allow for that downtime to come, and then I remember who I am, and I get back up, and I just don't allow myself to stay there long. But I think my advice to that would be, you must feel the feels. You absolutely must feel the feels.
Because if you don't, what happens?
Suppression is what is disease, in my opinion.
Amen.
When you think about even my book as a whole piece, I think that was the sickness that was my mother, is that clearly she had things in her life that she didn't talk about or heal from, and that became her illness, and the monster that became her. And again, in turn, maybe that's exactly what fueled me to say. And I just have always been one of those people to put it all out there. And I just realized the more that I dealt with my feelings, even though I didn't do it for long periods of time, but the more I acknowledged them, the more healing, kept taking place.
Toxic positivity. Wow, I didn't know there was a phrase out there. So yeah. And I think that when we don't demonize feelings, when we just say they're just feelings, they're not good or bad. Being happy isn't good. It's just being happy.
Right.
Being sad or even angry is not bad. It's just
Feelings.
It's just feelings. So feel them. Don't be led by them. Like you said, don't stew in them, but do feel them.
And I think let's face it, we all have phases in our life where we get stuck stewing. And it's just like you said, realizing, okay, these are just crazy thoughts that I am letting take over. Now I need to stop letting them take over.
And it's not that it's bad, it's just not beneficial.
Correct.
This is not helping me raise my vibration. So let me feel. If I continue to stew in them, it's not that I'm feeling them. It's that I'm marinating in them. Yes. And there's a difference between marinating and stewing in my feelings and feeling them.
Correct. Agreed.
And that's our show for today, folks.
Take that one.
Oh, my goodness sake. Honey, if you were to sum up your whole experience of awakening thus far, what words would you use?
Well, I would like to just say, oh, it's just this magical thing I hope we can all experience. But if I really...
sparkly clouds and rainbows.
And really it is, it's tough. It's beautiful and tough at the same time. But I really think for me, if I had to summarize awakening, I would call it a recalibration. It's this openness, these aha moments, this journey back to what you already knew. When I try to explain it to my friends who have never been through it, I try to say it's not new information. It's called an awakening for a reason.
Right.
You're just remembering some parts and bits and pieces.
Right.
And boy, oh boy, was it amazing. It wasn't overnight, but it was fast. It was really fast. And I was, it was magical because I was like, wow, all of these tools and things are here and I didn't think about them for so long and now they're back. And it was just a recalibration.
Yeah. And I think that, and maybe we'll get this a little bit more later, but it's a re-seeing of things. Like, I remember talking to Jeff the other day, I pulled tarot cards, and for the longest time I saw the one particular card as storm clouds up above. For whatever reason, I looked at it and I saw that they were actually flowers in the sky. I ran down the hall. I said, Jeff, what do you see? What do you see? And he's looking and he goes, oh my God, they're flowers. I said, have you always seen storm clouds? He said, yes. I said, we've had a different way of seeing, so I think
that's
for me,
exactly what it's like.
Seeing the same thing differently.
And that's what needed to happen for me to heal. I mean, ultimately, the forgiveness that all came from those new goggles, or I shouldn't say new goggles, recalibrated goggles that made me understand. I never really thought like, oh, my mother doesn't like me. She doesn't love me. I thought she felt that way about everybody. So it wasn't really me.
Personal.
But when I had this awakening and I looked with a different perspective and I understood and learned more about soul journeys and our contracts, I was able to see, wow, this is why we have this relationship. It's not something that I did when I was younger, or I was able to give the forgiveness to myself, to the situation, to her, when I was able to see it with those new goggles.
You talk about soul contracts and karma. Unpack that a little bit.
Well, at the beginning of my sobriety journey, I had a friend who recommended a book. It was called The Instruction by Ainsley McLeod.
Oh, I love him, Ainsley McLeod.
Yeah. And I was always spiritual in nature. I always believed in a higher power. I always believed that we were reincarnated souls, but I never gave it much thought. I had a belief. Then I read the book, and that book, which is very difficult to read, I took the gist from that book, but I understood it was that moment, finishing that book, that answered so many questions. Like, I wondered, why I was this way and my brothers weren't, and it made me understand we have soul contracts, we have soul journeys. I'm here to do my thing. They're here to do their thing. They may be my brother. They may be my mother, the person who gave birth to me. But really, really, really at the root of it all, that doesn't matter. You know, I mean, it matters because we chose them to be part of our journey. But it just solidified everything. It solidified everything for me to understand, like, wow, that's why.
Mm-hmm.
It just answered a lot of questions, and that's how I was able to give forgiveness. Like, okay, I get it now.
Mm-hmm. Do you think in understanding our soul contracts and our karmic connections, which I really believe also and resonates right with me, that you are more able to give permission to other people to be on their journey then? Like, okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
This is what you're, yeah.
Especially people who are closest to us, you know, like we want to tell them what's best for them and try to help them. And, you know, I have several people in my life where I'm just like, I pray for them. I wish they could get out of, and I realize it's because they haven't yet learned the lesson that's there. And I can see that in myself too. You know, one of the big things I talk about in the book is the self-sabotage. That is a repeated theme for me. And it took a lot of personal development to understand that my self-sabotaging, whether it comes with my weight loss journey or whether it comes with a project I'm working on, everything gets real good, and then I shut it down because I have that core belief that it can't be this good. It's not possible to be this good. I don't deserve it to be this good, or I don't know what it's like to have something that's this good. So let's do something to muck it up and bring it back down a few steps.
Let me just disappoint myself right now.
Absolutely.
Cut it off at the knees.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, and it was interesting because I had always known I had self-sabotaging patterns, but I didn't understand why until I went back and looked at the progression of my childhood and all of that trauma that I faced and all of those incidences that proved whenever something seemed great, the carpet got pulled out from underneath. So I just expect it.
Came into a vibration of an expectation that you would be disappointed or not heard or hurt.
And that and I projected that onto myself.
Of course.
I didn't want to disappoint myself. So just stop now before you go any further.
Don't even bother hoping anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's very deep, very deep. And I love that. And that's not to say that I've cured that, because I absolutely still have it. But I love that I can look in on it now and say, oh,
well,
here's
again,
what you're doing.
New eyes to see. And you can go, oh, I'm doing that again. That is just, let's just sit here for a moment. And again, our show for today. Oh my God. All right, so let's get to some fun, uplifting stuff. Bucket list. Okay. One of it was to visit and stay at Lake George.
Yes,
what else?
Yes. So I guess I have a professional and a personal bucket list.
Lay it on me, girl.
So professionally, my bucket list item is to do a TED Talk. I talk about a speech in my book that I did for my third grade teacher's retirement. And if anybody were to ask me when I felt one of the highest highs of my life, it was giving that speech. And I think when I gave that speech, I knew I was supposed to talk to crowds way back then. I mean, and that was 15 years ago, I think. I knew I was meant to move the crowd, and that's what I want to do. So doing a TEDx talk is my professional bucket list item. And personally, it's always around travel, it seems, but I want to go to Australia. I don't know why. The people, the images, the animals, something about that place has always spoken to me. I don't know if I lived there in a past life or something, but I'm going to go back in this lifetime.
Nice.
I feel called to go there. So those are two of
Bringing the hubs?
Yep. He's going to be there with me.
Nice. All right, so that was entered, the personal and then the professional.
Yes.
Very nice. Very nice.
Thank you.
Page 106 says, our learning never ends. What more do you have to learn?
Boy, I don't know, but it's definitely there. I mean, I just feel like there's actually a quote at the end of my book. I think it's at the very end of the book, and it's by Liz Gilbert. And it says that she believes the universe buries strange gems within us and then sits back to see if we can find them. And I know wholeheartedly that is the case. Just like I said before, like we're not supposed to be idle. We're not supposed to be content. There's just always going to be more lessons, and that we're always going to level up, and the evolution is just going to continue. So I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I definitely think that the lessons will definitely keep coming.
I just love how you call them gems that are buried in. They're not obstacles, they're opportunities.
They are. I love growth. I mean, it's icky and messy and muddy when you're in it, but I love it. I love getting to the other side and just feeling that evolution.
It's like me with a half marathon.
Yes.
I get to 10 miles and I'm like, I'm never doing this again.
But you do.
And I cross the finish line and I'm like, I'm signing up again for next year.
It's exactly like that.
You had mentioned this already on page 109, everything happens for a reason. Just real quick, because we've already touched upon it, but what was the reason for what you've been through? Let me ask first, did you pick it?
I think I did.
And this is kind of like, all right, I'm going in.
I think my journey, when I look back at all the pieces of my puzzle, was to learn to love myself most. Because I don't know, maybe in a past lifetime I expected or I received it all from other places. Because when I look, most of mine seems to be rejection and learning to take care of my own needs and loving myself and understanding who I am deep down inside in the collective.
Which really puts a spin on the different people in our lives. If you came here to learn to love yourself, then there's almost that if you had gotten all sorts of love from everybody else, would you have ever learned to love yourself? Maybe you would have. Maybe you would have.
And I think the message is that when you love yourself, you love everybody else. It's almost, backwards. Like, I have to love myself, and you have to love yourself in order to give the love that everybody else wants to or needs to receive from you. So it's actually a great lesson. One that if I signed up for it, I'm okay with that.
I need my own phrase. Oprah says it's aha. I need something like ooh-hoo.
Like a horn.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You say on page 97, hyper-independence and self-reliance. These are the reasons why I've made it this far. Does this have to do with the whole self-love part that you think that you came to experience?
Definitely, it's a piece of that puzzle. And I think I mentioned with a lot of my gifts, resilience and the hyper-independence, they're blessings and curses at the same time. I'm grateful for them, but at the same time, it's important to see where they're taking over and, and they're not needed. And that's almost another lesson in and of itself. Lessons within the lessons.
Really good. Yeah, because being self-reliant and, not necessarily relying on others is a real holy practice. It's a real wakening up, because then you can truly love another because you don't want anything from them. You're filled up in yourself. But if you get to the point where you're relying too much on yourself and you're excluding any help that other people would want to give you, then that can become egoic too.
Sure. So it's been a struggle to balance that. But again, just being able to see it and that awareness of it is definitely part of the whole awakening journey too.
Where do other people fit in when it comes to your healing?
Well, I have a small support system, but I have a great support system. And I think that I have, like my husband has been in the picture for 34 years, God bless his soul. And he's just been very compassionate and there for all of it. He's definitely had to watch the evolution of all of this. And, he's done such a great job being a neutral person. Because it was messy, it's been up and down. It's, it's definitely not all sunshine and roses. Now it feels more that way because I can look back in retrospect. But, as with anybody who's going through anything, going through it is a totally different story.
Messy. It's hard. What do you mean he remained neutral?
He just was so... so good about listening and not judging or giving me the advice, you should do this or you should do that, or this means this and this means that.
Oh.
He was definitely placed in my life for a reason. There's no doubt about that.
So he held space.
Yeah, he's always been able to hold space. He's a great space holder.
And that could be karmic connection too.
Yes.
We think of the karmic connections as all, I got to learn through this, but the karmic connection that you had with him, that he would be your space holder, because we all need someone who...
Absolutely.
Yeah, my hubs is my space holder too, and I hear what you mean by...
And I think too, like in reference to the book, when I finished the book, I referred to it as a story about my mother wound, but in retrospect, it really was a parent wound. I was lacking in both of those areas. And so I think I have always told myself that I was so grateful and thankful that my husband, who came into my life when I was 13, 14 years old, filled the void. You know, he was not just my boyfriend and my lover, but he was my best friend. And, you know, he really encompassed all of the things. He was my parent to tell me don't do that, or, you know, at that time. So, yeah, he was the whole package.
Well, it's funny, the next thing I say, page 87, you open up part 2 with husband. Can we just gush about him for a while?
Yeah.
So we have. Yeah.
Yeah.
He that made me smile, and I loved that it was him that opened up and on that positivity. You know, when you have a significant other that you can rely on, boy, is that a blessing.
Very blessed.
What advice or guidance, Jill, would you offer someone who has experienced wounding, either in childhood or in adulthood, and they're starting to feel that niggle of, well, maybe different levels. Maybe they're starting to experience the niggle of, what do I do with this? Or maybe they have not even started to experience it. They just know that they've been through trauma that they've never worked with.
Great question, and one that I love to talk about, because I understand that I'm a talkative and out loud kind of person. I mean, my group in Facebook is Living Out Loud. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to go on a rooftop and shout everything out. But
Thank you for saying that, because I'm someone who's more quiet, and I've journaled, but then when I was done journaling, for me, I ended up burning it. You know what I mean? As a ceremony. And I thought, should I have published it? I don't know.
Yeah.
So unpack a little more.
So I just feel like to really live in integrity, we can't bury what has happened to us. And sometimes we think we're protecting other people. We don't want to hurt other people, because when we own our story or talk about our story or share our story, we're affecting other people. And I certainly had to make this decision when I shared my book. You know, my book tells some really ugly things about people who were supposed to be loving me and taking care of me. But we've come to the other side of that. You know, this was 40 years ago, and healing and forgiveness has occurred at different levels with all the different people in this story. And I just feel like you really need to do the work. That's my best advice, is that whether the niggle is there or the just little way back seedling of maybe I need some therapy, or, you know, go to the therapist, get a life coach, start talking about it and unpacking it, whether that involves, you know, verbally talking about it, doing journaling about it. I've spent money on coaches and courses over the past couple of years, and I'll tell you that investment in myself is the best money I have ever spent. I would not be able to sit here and talk to you about these things or have been able to put these things in my book had I not done these courses to say, oh, that's why I behave like that. That's why I have that issue.
So what you're saying is that getting your story out of your body is what's important. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a book form.
Correct.
You're called to do that. But other people could be called to put it in their own little private book and maybe share it with 2 or 3 friends.
Or even just a therapist or coach.
Okay.
Because somebody's going to be there to help reflect back to you.
Right.
And you need that reflection because you're seeing it one way, your way, your perspective.
Yeah.
You know?
So get with someone who can be an empathic witness.
Absolutely.
Because you might need to be hugged. You know, you might
You
need
will.
to have
You
that
will.
inner child be told, I'm so sorry this happened to you. You might need someone to help with the movement of the energies through
Yes.
hugging. Or
One of the
through-
first resources that I tapped into was cord cutting meditations. If you've never heard of them, look them up and Google them. When I started doing cord cutting meditations, that's when I truly felt like I was disconnecting from the
Right.
situation or the purpose, and I could take a different
Right,
look.
right. Well, because you were removing their energies from continuing to go back and forth
Correct.
and calling back your own energies of stuff that you gave away,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
or
Very
that was
powerful.
taken from you because you were too young to understand any different.
Correct.
So basically what you're saying is get the story out of you, but you can decide how you're going to do that.
Yes.
It doesn't
What
have
happens?
to be
Yes.
like this.
What happens next is I think will unfold naturally, but there is definitely something to be said about getting it
Yeah,
out.
I agree. You know, pulling it out of this energetic realm, out of your physiology, and onto a piece of paper, and then out of your mouth. As you remember, we talked earlier about writing it, but then reading it also.
Totally different experience.
Oh my God!
I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I read something back to myself and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? I didn't even remember thinking it, let alone typing it out there. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so this is a message not just for the reader but for me too.
Me too.
Yeah. Very, very cool experience.
If you could go back and talk to your younger self, what would you tell her?
I would definitely tell my younger self to stay tuned in and tapped in, because there was a time in my life when I was very tuned in and tapped in. And obviously when I was a child, but even into my early teen years, I can remember having very, very visual, clairvoyant premonitions of things that were going to happen and then watching them play out. And then I got tangled up into life, adolescence and discovering myself and, all of that messy stuff. And that light went out and definitely didn't come back until recent years, and it's slowly coming back. But I would tell my younger self to stay tuned in and tapped into that for sure.
So I'm going to ask you something that's kind of challenging.
Sure.
And it's something that I'm still on my journey with also. Page 127, you say we are all worthy of redemption. Everyone?
Absolutely everyone.
Gary
too. And I know that's probably the toughest piece of this pie. A lot of people ask me where I'm at with that. I have not seen, since the exit in my late teenage years, I have not had to encounter any type of seeing of him or hearing of him really at all. But I will say that again, when it came to reading the book, the instruction, and understanding, of course during those years, I thought he was the problem. And then in retrospect, I'm able to look at how he was invited in and encouraged to stay because something was playing out there with the two of them that unfortunately we were witness to, because there was some takeaway there for us. And while I didn't like the situation, and I have feelings obviously around all of those years of absolute horror, I understand now that it wasn't just him, that there was just a whole big intricate thing going on and playing out there. So I definitely was able, I wouldn't say that forgiveness, I haven't given forgiveness there to the multitude that I was able to for my parents as of yet, but I've definitely started that process.
Do people have to tell you that they're sorry for you to forgive them?
No. And even when it comes to the forgiveness that I bestowed upon my mother, there was no actual physical interaction. I did all of that work from afar and sending love and forgiveness from afar, because ultimately forgiveness is something we do for ourselves. It is not about the other person. It's about our own understanding and processing. So that was another big thing that came with that awakening that I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, really high lesson. And if we're here to experience something, and I think a lot of my journey has been, I want to experience forgiveness, then something really rough had to have happened to me for me to experience forgiveness.
Sure.
And once I came into an understanding, I thought, what if the people in my life that were so rough on me, what if they volunteered to be like, I'll be the one that pisses you off and does this and does that, and then you can walk this forgiveness thing. And I thought, oh, it doesn't make it hurt any less. But, and with my situation too, is that some of the people passed before I came to that understanding. And I realized that forgiveness isn't about someone groveling. It's about something that you do for yourself so that you can see again.
Absolutely. It brings the peace that you need. If you can't do that work to get to that level, to bring peace to that situation, then you're going to continue to have to repeat that lesson or that feeling over and over. So that kind of goes back to what you said about what I say to somebody who's thinking about it, is that that's what I learned, is that the more we push it down, the more it just tries to resurface. And so do the work to get past it, because it's so liberating once you do. For sure. I'm hoping that we are encouraging others, because,
to be able to see people who are on the other side of their woundedness and have come into a place of, okay, I'm on my healing journey and I feel more forgiven and forgiving than ever, would be something that I wish that I'd had, you know?
I say to people all the time that my only regret about this awakening is that it happened when I was 46 years old. How I wouldn't have loved this insight 20 years back,
well, that's
30
what I'm
years
hoping
back.
with this new vibration that's in the world, that we're having kids grow up in an atmosphere of forgiveness already. You know what I mean? Understanding.
So they don't have to awaken, that it's just naturally there. Absolutely. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing?
Pray that for our grandchildren. I'd love that.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, here my next question was, how do we forgive? I think we've been unpacking that. All right, this is kind of a tough question.
Okay.
Is your mom passed?
Yes.
If she was still alive, would you have published the book?
It's funny you should say that, because she passed just as I was wrapping it up. And literally, last March, it'll be a year ago right now, and when she passed, I felt it was her way of giving me permission. I actually felt a lot of things. I actually had some downloads that she was giving me some nuggets and some gems that I was supposed to follow through on. And I really feel like she did give me the permission to publish the book.
It's going to help a lot of people.
I think so too.
And if that can be part of her legacy, all the better, right?
That is her legacy. And I wish that somebody would have been there, or something would have been there to help her awaken.
It makes me emotional.
I wish.
Hurt people hurt people.
Yes, for sure. And I've seen a lot of it. And everybody knows somebody like that. But when you come from a family where that's just everywhere, it's really tough. It's really tough not to internalize it. And like I said, I have siblings, one in particular, who, unfortunately didn't get to the other side of this yet, but I send love and light all the time, and I still have hope, and it's never too late. I mean, it's just never too late. I'm not a perfect adult. I've certainly done things in my childhood and in my adulthood that I'm like, what the hell was I actually thinking? And I've had to honor my self-forgiveness, and I've had to unpack, wow, why did that happen? And find the silver linings. And I dare say I have no regrets. I've done stupid things, but I have no regrets, because I've had huge lessons in everything that I've done.
Well, my oldest was kind of my experiment. Sorry, Andrew. And I owed him apologies. And the other 4, I seemed to be getting better, but I was in the midst of my own, oh my God. And so I didn't raise him in those first 10 years the way that I would have had I been more myself.
Sure.
So as he got to be 16, 18, 20, 22, I was like, oh my God. And so I went and I apologized. And I said, I'm sorry. I had some people who said to me, you're the parent, you don't need to apologize. I thought, well, okay, you hold that opinion.
Yeah.
That's not my point of view.
Yeah.
I owe this kid an apology. Of which he said, Mom, you're making a way bigger deal out of it but I accept your apology.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I just want to clear the air between us, but
Sure.
I'm not above apologizing to anybody for the ways that I treated, but at the same time in a space of saying, I'll do better now that I know better.
And it's amazing how I feel like any lessons that we have come from some inkling of judgment. Like any lessons I've had, I know it's because I once held a view or opinion about it, and it was like, no, you know what? Let me show you why that little opinion of yours doesn't apply. And then boom comes the lesson. And so in hindsight, when I look at my lessons from adolescence and adulthood, almost all of them come because I had held a judgment about somebody or something, and I had to get some clarity on it.
Humbling. I remember some judgments I've had on both of my parents, and then I became a parent, and
out the door they went.
bye-bye. You
For
know,
sure,
it
for
really got to the point where I was like, okay, that doesn't mean that behavior didn't hurt, but I can understand why it happened. And maybe it was less about me and more about their own pain.
Yep.
So, girlfriend, let's talk about weight loss surgery a little bit.
Sure.
This particular phrase of words that you said spoke to me. The benefits of feeling good weren't enough to keep me from self-sabotaging. And we've talked about self-sabotage a little bit.
Yeah.
That's big. The benefits of feeling good weren't enough to keep me from it. Why not?
Exactly, right? Because it comes back to that whole too good to be true thing, I think, you know? I was so disappointed.
That's what I say. I had lost control again, disappointed myself for this again.
And I sustained for so long and then let go. You know, I known my whole life food was my emotional support system. And I unpacked that in later years and realized it was because that is the one way my mother connected to us. She cooked with love. She baked with love. She took so much pride in her food. She loved it when we loved her food. And when we loved and indulged in her food, that's when we received love from her.
Oh.
And
that's what love was for you.
That was what, I even wrote that in her obituary.
It was parental love.
It was.
It wasn't just love. It was parental.
It was how she communicated and connected with people. That's what food was for her. She didn't have any other skills to connect with and love people aside from food. It was her thing. And so from a very early age, I caught on to that. And so I overindulged in everything because it was love to me. And it wouldn't be just from her, from my grandmother, from anybody. I antiquated food with love. And so I became an emotional eater. And, you know, to this day, I still struggle with that same thing. And I was very grateful when weight loss surgery came along because I mentioned in the book, at that time I was very heavy and I was just out of control. And I had no energy for my little girls and I felt terrible. And so then when I got to the other side of the success of losing 100 pounds, it was truly, I mean, of course I felt great that I looked good and I felt better, but really it was just how good I felt. I was like, holy cow, I just feel amazing. I could run a freaking marathon. In fact, I did. I ran my first 5K race that I never had done before in my life. And then, you know, several years into that, it crumbled and the weight came back.
Is it because it was a symptom of something deeper?
I really don't know because it did coincide with my cancer diagnosis. And I had a lot of downtime and I couldn't be physical like I was. But I also realized that food became my best friend again during that whole time. I was emotionally eating because of what was happening. So I had fallen right back into that same rut again. You know, again, a repeated lesson, I guess.
I think I'm still on the journey of becoming my own best friend. Are you? Are you there?
I'm still on the journey. I think there are days when I'm spot on and days when I lose touch for sure. And I need a reminder, but
at least on the days when you need a reminder, you know you need a reminder.
I do, but I like that you posed that question because I do think, like, I reference my grandmother being my biggest cheerleader, and I reference my husband being my biggest cheerleader, but I don't think there's any feeling better than when I'm being my own biggest cheerleader.
Biggest cheerleader. Yeah. It's like that's
and that's what birthing this book really feels like. Like, this to me is my legacy, and only part of my legacy, because as I've said, book 2 is already in the works, but this is just saying, it's not playing victim, but it's saying...
That's my next question.
Sorry.
Is it possible to share our story without being the victim?
I think that when you share your story, you are showing how you once were the victim, but then how you were the hero to that victim. Climbing out of that victim mentality. And that's what our job is to show, or at least that's what I'm feeling called to do, and I know that's what you do is showing that, yes, okay, so something happens, and for a moment we are victimized.
Well, there's a difference between being victimized. That's legit.
True.
But then coming into a victimhood consciousness.
Correct. Staying there.
Totally different.
Correct.
If you are victimized, you are really being bullied. But when you come into a place of being a victim of your circumstances all the time, and you feel yourself being bullied and batted around all the time, that's when I go, that's not power. It's not empowered living.
Right.
And it's usually what happens is we get to the root, and there was a point when you were victimized, and that needs to be healed.
Correct. I agree wholeheartedly. And everybody we know has that. I have a really good friend, and a lot of times we'll talk about this crazy childhood that I had, and she'll do a comparison of, I can't relate to that, but in my house it was being ignored, like that, it was silence was our punishment.
Everyone has a story.
And just how people don't realize, like, they might think they had a beautiful childhood and wonderful parents, but really deep down we all have something that needs to be healed and worked on. And even that I wasn't abused physically, but I was ignored, that's trauma too. Everybody has trauma that needs to be processed.
So can we take, and it's funny because I say here, do you think it's possible to unpack our story without there being a good guy and a bad guy, without demonizing the other, without demeaning the other, because they're just part of the story and part of the human experience that we're having? And so maybe being more open to being able to say, this is what's going on. This hurt me, even though it sounds like it's such a minor thing. But when we were, I was talking one time with someone, and they said, I know this sounds so trivial, but one time I was sitting next to my mom, and this is the person's story, and we were at the bank, and the teller had offered to give me a lollipop, and she said, nah, that's okay, we're good. And my mom never even asked me if I wanted the lollipop. She said, for whatever reason, like, I am 57 years old, and that bothers me still. I was like, well, that's a little bit of trauma.
Yeah.
And it sounds goofy, but maybe it's not.
Because there's probably more to that story.
Right. And even if there wasn't, it bothered you on some point.
Yeah.
So, but does the mom have to be demonized? Does she have to be, you can just be like, you know what? There's a mom who didn't know any better in that moment, busy, whatever, maybe she'd do it different. But we don't have to get to that point. We can just say, this is how you're feeling, then take care of it.
Yeah. It's crazy because it's perspective. I mean, obviously it all boils down to perspective. I had some conversations recently with my older brother after writing this book, and I did not speak of my brothers in the story intentionally. I don't want to tell their story, but he shed some light on some of the scenes I had talked about in here, and completely, totally different aspect. For example, I have a whole chapter in here dedicated to my grandmother, who I was extremely grateful to have. And then my brother reminded me of some stories, and my grandmother's loyalty really being to my father and not necessarily to us children. And he wasn't doing it to deter me or say your perspective was wrong. But it's funny, I wrote about her being my hero, and he has some different ideas. And so when we talk about, you know, that the person being in a different light, well, we all have these different feelings around it, and you can't take that away.
Right.
We
your
can't
feelings
take that
are
away.
your feelings.
Yeah, you can't take that away. I can't take that away from him. He can't take away from me how I felt about it. But it's just, like you said, coming to that understanding of it wasn't necessarily about you. Like, it wasn't, when her mother declined that, it probably wasn't, you know, she's probably just like, no thanks. You know, it might have been nothing more than just saying
Never
no
thought
thanks.
of it again.
Yeah. But our perspective is what you know, brings
and
us
I think that we need to honor what we're feeling.
We do.
Just honor it.
We do.
Is it good that I feel that way? Is it bad I feel that way? It's wasted energy to go into that space. Do you feel that way? Well, yes. Let's work with it from there.
And how many times have we been taught to do that? I mean, that's the whole thing. Most of us don't process our feelings. I didn't process my feelings till way later in life. You know, I look at some of those patterns. Myself as a parent, one of the things that I was taught as a child is don't cry. You know, you're fine. You can do it. Don't you know, when my kids got hurt, I was not the coddler. I was, okay, you're going to be fine. Let's go. I did the same exact thing.
I get it, honey. I get it.
And so that's what it's about, is about noticing those patterns. You know, like I'm a cycle breaker in a lot of things. But there's still work to be done. There's still work to be done.
That's the human experience. You never get to there. You've already arrived.
Yeah.
You're already there. Now just experience it, you know, and understand that life is messy.
It is. And it's always going to be.
It really is. And yet it's beautiful. There's gifts in it.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for every ounce of it.
What's coming next for you?
Well, as I alluded, I'm already writing book number 2. I will not give away big juicy details.
Contact me. I'll tell you all about it.
But I will say that an ancestry test has come along and shook up the family tree. And there's a lot of juicy chapters unfolding there. So I am definitely writing about that already. And initially when I wrote the book, I thought it was going to be a nice cathartic healing experience, and really I didn't think about it. But now that it's out and I'm in it, I can tell that I meant to share the story to help heal and transform others. So I'm very open to what can transpire from this. Maybe some public speaking, maybe some course development, whether it be on weight loss or sobriety or whatever's going to transpire. I'm open to it, and I foresee that there will be some things happening with that. So I'm going to be busy. Right now I'm just trying to enjoy the ride of it's here, and I'm very, very excited about all the feedback and reviews I've been getting. It's really been really cool.
It does seem that you're really speaking to people.
Yes. And a lot of people are reaching out publicly, but even more so privately. And I love it. I love that I'm sparking a conversation about
a conversation.
Yeah, time to heal. It's never too late to heal. Don't think because it was so long ago that it can't be spoken of and processed, because it can, and I'm living proof of that.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for talking about it.
Thank you so much. I didn't even get to some of the other little questions, but
because we could go on for hours, I'm
sure
sure
we could. But it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm thankful for your vibration in the world at this time, when I think that the collective is ready to come into a space of surrender, of letting go, of coming out from behind the masks, and realizing, normalizing feelings, and allowing themselves to expect that they're meant for more. That mediocre living isn't their destiny after all.
Absolutely. I like ending on that note, because if there's any one thing that I think I want to say to the readers and to your listeners, it's exactly that. It's that there is more. You know, there just always is more.
And they're gems.
Yeah, they are gems.
Allow
them.
Thank you so much. This is our story for today, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's been an honor, dear listener. Remember, all of us have a story to tell, for we are all both teller and listener. something magical happens, alchemizing, when we open our hearts to listen, when others open their mouths to tell their story. It's like this mystical bond that connects us all in community, where we wake up that to remember that we are all one. And when Jill is healing, we're healing too. So if you are hurting, there's a part of us that's hurting as well. So we encourage you on your journey. If I can be of assistance, I am a guide, and so I would be happy to help you on your journey. If you're not exactly sure what to do next, contact me. Links are below. Feel free to share, like, subscribe, comment. We've got a conversation started, and we want to keep it going.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And the phrase that I've been using that's been speaking to me lately, and I'll end it with this, is inhale deep, exhale. Inhale deep, exhale long. Just to come into a space of realizing you are a spiritual being, this energetic yumminess that happens to be wearing some skin, and you're learning things that you've only forgotten and you're waking up to. So
Absolutely.
wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for sharing this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.